Hello everyone, it's Jasmine and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm back with another mixed media project for the design team for Infinity Engravings. We are going to start out with a chipboard box, and I got my box from Hobby Lobby. And I'm starting out with some Tim Holtz melange tissue wrap, and I've given my box a coat of gesso, 2 coats of gesso, to make sure it's nice and white. So I'm going to use some Prima soft matte gel to adhere my tissue paper. And I'm going to wrap this all the way around the edges to the inside, which can be a little bit tricky. You just kind of have to crimp the paper around the edges as you wrap it around. The top will stay smooth. You just got to get the paper. This paper is really malleable. It's really manipulatable. So you just got to get the paper decently saturated with the matte medium, and you can manipulate it without a problem. And then you'll need to trim it as you go so that you don't get too much trying to wrap into the middle. So you can see I'm just carefully adding medium and squishing the paper down when necessary. And then this will dry completely matte, so you won't see any blobs of glue or anything on the outside. I'm going to take my bone folder and kind of smooth it down. And you don't want big globs of matte medium underneath the paper. You just want enough to make sure it sticks. So let that completely dry, and I'm going to go in with some Delusions Cherry Pie acrylic paint and some clear gesso. Now the clear gesso I'm using to help it blend. And I want the print on the tissue paper to come through the paint. So that's why I'm using the clear gesso to kind of thin it out just a little bit. So I want a clear, bright, bold color, but I also want the print on the tissue wrap to come through. So that's why I'm using the clear gesso with the paint rather than just the paint by itself. Now, if you're not using the tissue wrap, you can just use the paint straight up. Excuse me. And you won't need to worry about the clear gesso. And I let the first coat dry, and then I did go in with the second coat. So here's the bottom of my box. So I've scooped out some clear gesso on my mat so I could keep the rest moist in the jar. And I have a little bit of silver paint. I kind of wanted to see how it would look swirled, the silver with the red, but I didn't end up liking it. So after I smoothed down the silver and the red, I didn't like it, so I let it dry, and then I went over it again with another coat of just red. So here's my top all dry, and I'm using this Gothic stencil. It's a mini stencil from Tim Holtz, and this one is in set 4. They don't name these, they just put them out in sets, and this one is from set 4. So I'm using some Faber-Castell Texture Luxe embossing paste. And this is silver. And this is a really soft, really metallic, high shine texture paste. And it's really lovely to work with. Has a texture of like soft butter. So I added that some to the top left corner and then the bottom right corner. And then I'll set that aside to dry. So here's my chipboard, and this is from Infinity Engraving. I'm going to cover this with some Cosmic Shimmer glitter and flake glue. And what you want to do when using this stuff is put on as thin of a coat as you can get. It's a little bit hard with the chipboard because it wants to stick in all the nooks and crannies. And then let it dry. And it won't dry like a traditional glue. It'll dry super tacky, and that's how it works. It's what you want to do. So I usually leave this for 15 to 20 minutes just to make sure it's all good and sticky. And then I go in with my metallic flakes. And this is just kind of like a super thin foil, and it's got different colors to it. So I'll go with my tweezers and pick out specific pieces, and then just add a whole bunch on top. And I'm using my tweezers, or you can use your fingers. You want to avoid touching the glue with your fingers as much as possible, just so that it retains as much stickiness as it can, so that you have the metallic flakes sticking to it, obviously. So once you get it all stuck down and smoothed over, you want to take a chunk of Rub It, Scrub It sponge by Ranger. Now these, when you buy them, it's a big, I want to say like 6x6 or 8x8 square. And it's got a black sponge on one side and like a scrubby on the other. And just cut off a chunk. That's what I've got here. And kind of rub it over the top. And this will not only kind of burnish the flake into the glue, but also remove any excess. So you get this super high metallic shine on your die cut. It's really pretty. And these jars of flakes will last you forever. I've been using mine for years and I haven't made a dent in them. So you get a ton in them and it goes forever. So I just take my sponge and kind of work it around the edges and through the middle and try to clean up any little rough bits. You also don't want to have a fan going on your surface when you're using this stuff because it'll blow all over. It's really super light, but it's really fun. So all those little bits and pieces I just slide right back in the jar. So here is the bottom of my box, and I'm using this stencil. It's also from set 4 of the Tim Holtz mini stencils. And I'm going to use some Nouveau embellishment paste. Embellishment mousse, sorry. This stuff is a little bit different. It's got a different texture than your other pastes. So you can kind of rub your blending tool into it, and then you get a really soft kind of polish look. So you can rub it through your stencil and you get a really soft look, or you can take a palette knife like I've got here and kind of mix it up in the jar and kind of work it back and forth, and it becomes a little more malleable, a little more movable. It's not nearly as stiff after you work with it. So as you can see, I can move it through my stencil and you get a decent pattern. I didn't quite like it. I wanted the edges to blend out a little bit more, so I added my stencil back and then I blend out the edges. So if you get yours and it's a bit stiff, it's not bad. That's just how they are. So they are a very different texture than your regular texture paste. For example, that silver one I used earlier, I wouldn't be able to do this buffing, polishing look with that because it's too soft. But with this, you can kind of rub your blending tool into it and then use it as heavy or as light as you want. And the color I'm using here is Mother of Pearl. Now I was going for a Harlequin romance meets shabby chic with this box. So that's why I did the texture paste around the edges in varying degrees of thickness and neatness, if you will. So I've got another stencil. This is Mini Hearts, and I'm using some Nouveau Glimmer Paste. This is super soft, really high glitter. And this has a color to the paste itself with the glitter. It's not a clear paste with glitter, but it's a colored gel consistency with glitter in it. So it dries opaque, it doesn't dry clear. And I've got red garnet and black diamond. So I apply the red garnet first, and then I add a little bit of the black diamond on top, just for a little bit of variability, a little bit of unexpectedness. You don't typically see black. And I was kind of thinking that might look really cool, so I went with it, and I really liked it. And depending on how thick or how thin you add texture paste to stuff is kind of going to determine how quickly it dries. So I've added my birds with some matte medium, and then I went in, after the middle had dried, I went in over the edges and add a little bit more. And that white pencil, I kind of stenciled in a bit of a heart shape to give me a little bit of a guide to add some buttons. These are by 28 Lilac Lane, and this is the Dragonfire color. Really beautiful mix of buttons, seed beads, flatback pearls, and sequins. And there's a really cool mix of buttons. So they're different sizes and different finishes. Some are matte, some are shiny, some have an iridescent quality to them. So I don't show all the footage of me adding this because it would just be really boring. But I've got a blob of matte medium on my mat, and then I just take the buttons and the seed flatback pearls and add them in, just kind of filling in where it's got room. And I try to add a lot of variability so that it doesn't get boring. And then after my seed beads and buttons are added, I'll take matte medium on a paintbrush or a small palette knife and kind of add it in, and then stick seed beads down with that. And I have a lot of fun doing this because I like to see what different textures I can get out of these mixes. And she has all kinds of colors, and they're really beautiful. And I used a combination of gold and silver with this. So there you can see that I've added seed beads and sequins and different colors of buttons, just kind of around the birds. My texture paste is dry. And that completes the project. So there's some pictures at the end you can kind of get a better look. And let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. Mixed media is a really open art form. So you can do what you want, experiment with what you want, play with colors, play with textures. It's a really awesome way of expressing yourself. So thanks for joining me today, guys. We will see you next time. And have a great day. Bye-bye.